Great to see you all again. I'm delighted to be on another OKR expert session. And we have Richard Russell today. Richard has worked with Google and also Amazon earlier and currently an OKR coach. Thank you, Richard, for taking time and joining us today. We are really happy to have you here with us. Let's get started with a brief introduction from you. And then I have lots of things to ask you.
Okay, so hi, my name is Richard Russell. I'm an OKR coach. I'm Australian, as you may hear from the accent, but I live in Luxembourg. I've been here for 7 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in London, where I worked for Google, which is actually where I came across OKRs. And I recall being introduced to OKRs at Google and thinking, well done, you've got a goal system. And I wasn't very impressed with it. I thought, hooray, we've got a goal system, that's good. What I did find interesting about this, and one of the reasons I got into OKR coaching, was that over time at Google, I discovered that people, that everyone I worked with was talking about the same things in the same way. And so we had a consistent set of alignment. And when we were talking about new ideas, or when we needed to work with a new team, or when you joined a new team, suddenly everyone was talking about the same goals and the same key results and the same words and the same metrics and so on. And I really created this alignment. As I became a manager at Google, I discovered that the way this worked is by having these discussions about OKRs and driving these conversations about OKRs, which then meant we put the thought into what we really wanted to do as a team. And then that would then drive all of our management, our way of working with our teams later on. So since I was at Google, after that, I joined a couple of startups. I joined Amazon in Luxembourg. That's why I'm here. I was at Amazon for 2 years. Amazon doesn't, at least the part that I was in, doesn't use OKRs, but I learned a huge amount about management and leadership from Amazon. Amazon's very good at that. They have their own goal system. It's a little different. I think they could benefit from OKRs, to be honest, but that's for another story for another day. And since then, I've been working with startups and other companies. I work primarily these days with growth stage startups, usually after they've raised a series A, B, C round, and they've got 20 to 50 people, sometimes 200 people, maybe 500 people. And they've realized that during their scaling, that their management style, which worked really well when they have 50 people or 10 people or 20 people, and they can talk to everybody, stops to work so well as they grow up bigger. And they get to the point where they struggling with focus, keeping everyone focused on the same thing, struggling with alignment, getting everyone to be doing something that's coordinated together in any sort of way. And they also struggle just communicating their vision. A lot of founders have a great vision and great ideas, but when you're communicating it to a larger number of people and you can't have that high bandwidth conversation with everybody, you then have a problem of how do you do this? So OKRs really help them. And I often work with the executive teams in those companies to help them adopt OKRs and solve some of their management problems as they're scaling up.
Perfect. No one can actually talk about OKRs than you. Delighted to talk to you today. As you're aware that we've been getting a lot of questions from the industry, from our customers, from people who are really willing to adopt OKRs. We've been getting a lot of questions. We have actually taken few and we've been talking to different people across the globe. So a few questions was very interesting. I thought this is actually a question definitely related to Richard. So I picked them for you and then here we are going to discuss about it.
Sure.
So one thing which we have also, while coaching, we see that when there is an OKR implementation plan in the organization, generally what happens is it starts with the CEO or the executive team. Sometimes it's actually proposed by a product team or some other team. So when some other team understands or wants to promote OKRs and making it actually to sell that as a concept to the executive team becomes very difficult. People really don't. That's another framework for them. So how that synergy can happen? What could be the core selling point for an executive team actually to have the buy-in?
For sure. So normally I work with, as I said, I work with executive teams usually because that's where you get the most leverage in an organization. Whatever you're doing in any organization, the higher up to the organization you are, the more control they have, the more ability they have to influence the ways of working and so on. So if it's possible, if you have interest, if there is someone at the executive level or a CEO who is interested, that's always the best place to start with OKRs. And you run that first there and then roll it down the organization. Now, I think that there's often situations where I think you're mentioning here, there's a team within an organization, maybe a product team, maybe it's a CPO, maybe it's a head of product or a product manager, or some other part of the organization who's interested in running OKRs for their own group. or interested in running OKRs, but they haven't yet necessarily got the buy-in from the
Right.
top of the organization? And that's a really interesting question. So I answer this in two different ways. One, the first way is what to do when you want to run OKRs yourself. The second one is, how do you propose OKRs for the executive team to adopt? So firstly, when you're running OKRs for yourself, your own team, your own group, it's really important to be thinking about how you're setting expectations. So you run OKR, you set OKRs for your team, you have a vision, you have a strategy, you have something you're trying to achieve. You're setting out your OKRs, your objectives being the things you're trying to achieve, like the main points, the main headlines, the inspirational goals, if you like, of what you're trying to get done. The key results being the definition of success for those things, like how do we know we succeeded in achieving that goal for this quarter? So you do that for your team, and you make sure your team understand that. Now, when you're working with collaborative teams across ways, like people you're working with, stakeholders, you can use the same wording, right? The one thing that you're going to need to be careful with is making sure that you're setting expectations correctly around the likelihood of achieving them, right? So if you set an objective or a key result that's very ambitious for your team, and you tell your team, look, this is like a 70% goal. Like if we hit 70% of this, it's amazing. It's fantastic. We're winning. And that's a really great stretch goal, a great technique that's often used within OKRs to drive high performance and high attainment and high ambition. But when you're talking to colleagues, stakeholders, or managers in particular, upwards in the organization, you need to be very explicit about, this is what I expect to achieve. So you generally want to communicate just your 100% expectations. So if you have an ambitious goal, roll it back, make sure that you're saying to everybody, this is what I think we will achieve and what we do. And then if you exceed that because you've told your team a more ambitious goal, right? So let's be specific here. Let's imagine that your team is trying to reduce, let's say we're doing something simple like reducing the increasing conversion rate, right? We're trying to increase conversion rate from 4% to 8%. And that's a really ambitious goal. So you say to your managers and your colleagues and your stakeholders, we're going to increase it from 4% to 6%. Right? And because you're confident you can get to 6%, you say to your team, we're going to try and get to 8%. And that means if you hit 7%, everybody's impressed, everybody's happy, your team is happy, and you've delivered a great result, better than expected. If you say to everybody else, we're aiming to hit 8%, but we might not, and then you don't, then everyone's disappointed. And now you have an expectation management problem, and it's really difficult. So that's the one thing I'd use to do. But the important thing about OKRs, the thing that's really relevant for managing expectations, is that when you write good OKRs, the content of them, the objective and the key results that you have should matter to your stakeholders, your customers, and your management. If they're internal things and they don't matter or they require a lot of explanation, that means they're not great OKRs. So try and make great OKRs that do matter to your stakeholders, and then they become really useful tools for managing those expectations and managing upwards and across and communicating with other people. So that's the first method, which is really about when you want to run OKRs in your team and how do you manage upwards and outwards. The second thing I'm talking about here is, how do I get the rest of my organization to come on board with OKRs? And the fact is, you can't, right? You have to adjust to the fact that there are things that are outside of your control. So number one, you can't expect to do that. You can't expect that people will just come on board. What you can do is succeed in doing what you're doing within your organization and manage very well upwards and outwards. When you're doing this, then people in the rest of the organization start to see, this team, this product, this group, this division, whatever it is, it seems to be managing well and seems to be delivering great results. How are you doing it? And then they start to look at what's happening there, and they start to adopt some of the techniques. They'll start to adopt some things around this. Now, maybe they'll adopt how to write their goals, but not the whole OKR system. Maybe they'll adopt revising their goals every quarter, right? That might be a good step towards the right direction. Maybe they'll just be interested and say, you're using OKRs. What is that? How does it work? And can we use this? So that can be a really good technique as well to get them on board with this. Finally, of course, you might be in a situation where they've decided to adopt OKRs, or they're possibly interested, but you'd like to propose some OKRs upwards to them. And that's another thing that's slightly challenging. But the real key here is, and this is really important as a manager, no matter who you are, where you are, or any leader in any situation, is really understanding and trying to really understand what they're trying to achieve, what the strategy is, what success looks like. And you can have those conversations. What are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? How do we define success? And then you just put that into an OKR form. You can propose that as, this is what I think you're trying to do. And then people start to say, yes, that is what I'm trying to do. And it looks like an OKR, and then it becomes something they can start using. But it's very hard to sort of force them down a path they don't want to go. So the real thing here is to understand, ask those questions. What are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? How do I filter that down? When they list 15 things, which things are more important than which other things? Like, which are the most important 3 things? And then we can put those things as OKRs. That's my general advice for how to work with managers on OKRs.
Awesome. Very well defined. I mean, new thought process. Yes, I mean, all the scenarios, whatever you have mentioned, we come across there. There is sometimes buy-in, there is not buy-in. Other teams adopting it earlier. Some take time to adopt the entire organizational wide. Yes, these are challenges. I think people who have asked this question will be very happy with what they heard.
Yep.
To move on, Richard, but another frequently asked question, wherever we go on the workshops that we attend to, the adoption, right? I mean, sometimes, if it's proposed from the executive team and, it becomes a forced adopt. If they tell, should I really even start doing it? I really don't see the purpose on it. One team might really agree to it, another team doesn't agree to it mostly. So how do we check the balance? But end of the day, we are all traveling towards a common goal, and everyone has to be aboard. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to actually navigate the entire system into towards the goal. So in that case, how do you really make them interested about the entire process? How do we increase adoption quarter by quarter at least?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a really interesting question, and it reveals something that I think is kind of important. And that is that OKR adoption on its own isn't really the goal. And in some sense, that's slightly controversial, especially coming from an OKR coach, right? I mean, surely what we're all about is getting everyone to adopt OKRs. No, the goal is actually to deliver the results, to meet the results of the business, to grow the business. You want to be focused on your business and on your customers, and on creating value for your customers. OKRs are a great tool to help you get there, right? Now, in some situations with some teams, it matters more than other teams. Now, in my experience, when you have a team that's heavily operational, OKRs are a little less significant, and it's more significant to be using KPIs and just tracking your data on a regular basis than having those operational excellence type work. OKRs are still helpful to help you move the needle, right? But it's much smaller. It's a smaller part of the work. If you're looking at a project team or a product team or something like that, OKRs tend to be the large part of the work, right? And that's the largest part. So it's very important for that team. So, but at the same time, you want to start with what problem you're trying to solve in the organization, in this group. What am I trying to do? Am I trying to help people to deliver results in the right way? And what's the right tool to do that? Often it's OKRs, sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's other things. Sometimes you need a combination of things, right? So that's number one. OKR adoption is not the goal. The goal is to deliver results for the business. However, OKRs are still useful. And so what I suggest we do is you start off again with the top of the company, the highest part of the organization you can, because that's the scope that you're working in. It's very hard if you're trying to get adoption for the whole company. You can't sort of say, okay, let's have OKRs just on this product and then try and get everyone else to adopt it. You kind of have to go up to the top and have OKRs adopted there. And once the executive team is using OKRs, and they're using this in a sense of, this is what we're trying to achieve, here's how we define success, here's how we're measuring success, and in their regular day-to-day meetings and the day-to-day weekly business reviews, the quarterly check-ins, anything like that you're doing, those kinds of meetings, if we're having that discussion about what is our plan and how does our plan help us to deliver these objectives, these key results, that causes everyone to realize these are important. Because if they're not talked about in those meetings by executives, if they're not paid attention to, and then of course they're not important, right? And so of course no one's going to adopt them. If you demonstrate that they are important by saying, what is the plan and how does this plan help us to deliver our OKRs, and what do we need to change about our plan, given what we've learned, what do we change about our plan to help us deliver our OKRs, then it causes them to become quite important. Now, as you're doing that, you're going through the organization and you're then asking people to deliver things. And then they then have a problem. It's, how do I deliver stuff? How do I deliver these results? And part of that is about breaking these OKRs down into something that matters for my team, my group, my product area, in my area, my area of responsibility. And OKRs can really help with that. And once they see the pattern happening above them, it becomes a lot easier to say, I'm going to duplicate that pattern down here and talk about, this is the things that I'm trying to achieve, and here's how I define success. And therefore, because I'm defining success like this, these are the problems I want my team to work on. And it's a really great tool for delegation. But until I've seen that pattern working somewhere else, it's really hard to adopt that pattern on my own. So I need to see the example. I need to have a problem or a motivation to be able to have a need to do this. and then I need to find the applicability and then start doing it. So you kind of need to have that that drive, but you can detect that by talking to people about what their problems are, what they're trying to do, and how they're going about doing it, and how do they know their plans are going to deliver the results that we need, and all that sort of stuff. And it tends to get people triggering and thinking about what they're really trying to achieve here.
Awesome. Perfect. I mean, as you're absolutely right, as you said, we've also seen a lot of changes when the executive starts driving and starts owning the entire objective. They do the regular
Yeah.
checklist, they do the regular review. The adoption has been really as good as more than 80% in the first cadence itself. So we've seen that really the results when someone from the team guides it around. So that's absolutely right.
I just realized there's one other thing that happens in OKR that is preventing OKR adoption that I've experienced in quite a lot of my customers. And that is that there's always somebody in any organization, there's somebody or some group of people or some people who object to it for some reason. And they're like, okay, I don't like OKRs because I used them on my last company and it sucked, or I've heard about it, or I read this article, or I tried something similar, or I prefer this other way of doing things, whatever it is, right? And there's resistance from different people. And this happens in every single one of my clients. There's at least one manager, one executive who's like, OKRs, I don't want to do OKRs. And this usually comes down, the way I deal with this as a consultant is I go, first of all, I start by interviewing the key execs and finding out what they think, what they're feeling about this. So then they have the opportunity to express this to me. Sometimes I can address these issues by changing the method. OKRs are not a here is the set of rules and you must follow these rules kind of method. It's very much a set of principles that you adapt to the organization. So commonly OKRs are like no more than 3 objectives, no more than 5 key results. Great rules, really helpful rules. One objective is even better. But if you have an organization that's like, but I really need 7 OKRs, right? And they need that because they can't think of anything else. Or another one that often happens is key results must be written there with a number, right? And have a outcome-based number change, right? No, but what I really need is a milestone. I need to have a milestone about delivering this. Go for it. Have a milestone. Put what you need. Put what you need that you think is going to matter for your business. Write down the thing that matters for your business in the way you think it matters, and then at the end of this quarter, have a retrospective and figure out what it is now, and figure out what to change. Do I learn from this? Because the only way people will learn and adapt is by trying things out and going, turns out that 7 OKRs was too many, and now I've got a problem, and now I have to solve that problem. Because if I go and say, no, you must not have more than 3 OKRs, then all that happens is they have to do this work to filter down to 3 OKRs, which would be good work to do, but then they resent it, and then they resist delivering this because of it. But I really want to have 7, we have this constant debate. So that's one of the things that I do. And the second thing, that the other part of this is basically just listening to those people, acknowledging it and saying, yes, I know that I know that's painful. I know that you have had issues in the past. By the way, frequently in the past, it's been because OKRs have been linked to compensation or reviews, and that's a big issue. And that's something that always needs to be talked through about how do we do this, and how do we deal with compensation or reviews or performance management, because OKRs are not a performance management tool. It's all about delivery and getting the results. And then you assess performance after that using some of the same metrics, but not the actual OKRs. Right. But they're usually the top issues that come up, and mostly it's about being flexible with that and listening to people's objections and taking them on board and saying, sure, we can do things differently for you guys because you're different.
Rightly said, resistance is something that we've seen quite often. At least 2 teams are there always trying to, I've seen quite often one team, what is in it for me dream. They really want to know why should I even adopt OKRs? Tell me, what do I get out of it? So they want outcome before they even start planning their OKRs. Yeah. So these 2 set of people are really very tough to get aboard. And as long as they understand the value that it brings, and as you rightly said, if someone has a 7 OKR, if you ask him to curtail it down to 3 to 5, he feels all the 7 are important to me. I had 10, I had to cut it down to 7. Now you're asking me to cut it down further. And it's really very tough to, talk him out of it. But nevertheless, I know maybe in one cadence they don't understand, the next they definitely get into it. Yeah. That's been our experience pretty much.
I do have one customer who started with 16 and they cut it down to 6 and were very proud of themselves. And it's really good, really great results. But the second quarter after they did this, they then realized, you know what, we can actually filter this down into the things that really matter, because during the quarter, they realized that these things are important and these things are not as important, and we can drop them and it's not so bad. But it just took them trying to do it and testing it out before they realized this. And I can't, as an external person or as someone internal who's not the CEO, it's very hard to tell the CEO how to run things in their business. They've got to do it their way.
Very true, very perfectly said, rightly said.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next question, which I know, which is a favorite question of yours. You talk a lot about check-ins, right? I've seen a lot of webinar of yours, sessions or yours, which actually talks about more about the meetings, the review meetings, the check-ins that has to happen on time. How do you think that actually adds the entire value to the entire OKR value proposition? Because I think that plays a very key role when it comes to delivery of OKRs. A bit about the check-ins and the review meetings that we conduct.
For sure. So basically, if you think about what you're doing with OKRs, what you're doing in your business is you're trying to deliver results. The only way that happens, especially as a leader, manager, product manager, or whatever, is through meetings, through working with people, right? And communication is the key. So OKRs help you structure that communication. Now, how to do it really badly is to have your OKRs and look at the number and then ask someone what the number currently is, and then ask them why the number isn't where it should be, or where you think it should be, and what's gone wrong. Because that just creates a blame game. It feels like a performance assessment every week, and it's horrible for everybody. It doesn't get the right result. Instead, what you need to do is make sure that for every OKR that you have, for every objective you're trying to do, or for every group, or everything that you're trying to achieve with your groups, you've got some form of plan. Like, here's what we're trying to achieve. And then what you do is you talk about the plan. You talk how are we going with this plan? What's happened? Have we made progress on the plan? What problems have we come across? What learnings we haven't come across? What changes do we need to make to the plan? And the OKR, rather than being the subject of the conversation, is the North Star for the conversation. So usually in so many meetings I've been in, we've had some sort of debate, some sort of discussion about things, and someone says, hang on a minute, what are we really trying to achieve here? And that's the critical question in that meeting, where someone realizes, oh, we're trying to achieve that. We really should do this, right? It helps you clarify what you're trying to achieve. OKRs are the answer to that question. So rather than saying, what are we really trying to achieve here? You can say, we're trying to achieve this here. We're trying to achieve this. How do we make sure our plan helps us achieve that? And what you're doing is you're keeping everyone focused on the forward-looking thing, like the goal, and you're focused on the future plans. So we're looking at the last bits to know where we are and what happened, looking backwards to know what happened, where are we? Do we have a realistic understanding of what happens? What have we learned? What turns out to be harder than we thought, right? And then looking forwards, we're focusing on the forwards part. And you want to do that every week, but make sure that OKRs are a North Star in that conversation, as opposed to being the stick that you're using, if you like, right? So that's the main thing that I recommend with check-ins. That's like on a weekly basis. Now, at least halfway through the quarter, you also do want to say, so what's the number? Where are we with this, right? And you do want to have that check-in, but at the same time, that is really not an opportunity to beat people up over the number. It's really about, given where we are and where we're going and where we want to get to, and what's our number now, what's our result now, what's our prediction for the end of the quarter, what do we really need to change? And that's the opportunity to have that discussion about, do we need to change our target to be more realistic? Do we need to change the resources that we have? Is this OKR not valid anymore? We should revise it entirely. Do we need to call in some dependencies to make this happen? Do we need to change something drastic? And it's that check-in, the mid-quarter check-in, gives you a bigger opportunity that you can't do every week. You just can't have that conversation every week. It doesn't make sense. Every week you can go, what's our plan? What are we doing? How do we make sure we're going in the right direction? But then halfway through the quarter, you go, okay, do we need to make a big change or not? So those are the two types of meetings that I like to have. As I say, those OKRs should come up in those meetings. And in fact, if you're having a meeting about a project plan, whatever it is, in the quarter, one of the ways you can tell you have good OKRs is if the OKR comes up in the meeting quite naturally, as in, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve this. And that helps you sort of direct the meeting in the right direction. But it should be part of the normal conversation of meetings, as opposed to, we do our work and then we have an OKR meeting, we talk about OKRs. And then it's kind of this weird sort of separate thing where it's like, here's our OKRs, and we have like this ritual around OKRs, but then we do our real work. And then why do we have OKRs? Like, we need OKRs to be about the real work and the real value we're creating.
Cool. Very interesting. Also, we've also seen that the OKR check-in meetings, right? As soon as they are done and they finish their OKR and publish it after the OKR planning session, and the next week you will sit and start the check-in process. Is it already a week and we just completed the OKR process? I really don't want to discuss about it for the next 1 month. We are done with it.
Well, even the secret of that is basically to say, okay, it's the first week. Obviously, we haven't made any progress on delivering this OKR. Have we made progress on our plan? Do we have a plan? Have we written something down? And what's funny about this is that so many people at all levels of organizations, including me, are quite bad at writing plans. And it's really hard to do this. It's not necessarily a natural thing. You don't get taught to do it really. And so some people do, but I never got taught. And so you have an executive team or a cross-functional team or a management team or a product team. And frequently enough, no one's particularly good at writing a plan. But what you do is you write a plan. You write a one-pager of this is what we're going to do, this is what's going to happen, and this are the resources we need, and here are the problems, and here are the risks. Write it down however you think it makes sense in a relatively short 1-page, 2-page written document as opposed to a PowerPoint presentation. And then share it with everyone and have everyone collaborate on it and have everyone say, well, how can we improve this plan? Like what can we do to improve this plan? And you'll find that across a team of people will have some different ideas, you'll have pulled in some different directions, but generally you'll be able to improve this plan and you'll get this insight, especially if you have a cross-functional team, because people have different experiences. The head of marketing will ask questions at the CTO, and the CTO will be like, well, that feels like a really obvious question because I'm a CTO and it's obvious for me, but at least they get to explain the technology or why they're doing this. But at the same time, that extra different angle can often cause some new thinking that is unexpected. So not only do you get to increase your chief marketing officer's understanding of your technology and your technology officer's understanding of marketing, but you get to improve both of their skill sets and improve the plan as you go. So that's the way to start the quarter, is really with the plan. And then that becomes the theme of the check-ins much more than purely looking at the OKRs.
Got it. Perfect. Like rightly said, that's the a very reason, we actually have a software in place. So to make everyone's life more easier, we promote tracking, measuring everything, all the discussions plan can be tracked in the tool itself. That's how we made it easy. So I think that's helped us also in terms of adoption in a bit.
Yeah. Software is great for tracking these things and making sure that you're able to have the things in the right places to have the meeting and the discussion.
Exactly,
right? The purpose is always to have that discussion with human beings, talk about things, and use the software to refer to information and track information, but use the human communication to drive those
Very
discussions. True. And because that's the work actually happens.
Very true. I mean, OKRs is all about integrating and collaborating as people, right? I mean, that plays a lot of role when you're driving such meetings, OKR planning meeting or a retrospective meeting. While I'm talking about retrospective meetings, I mean, everyone has a quarterly retrospectives, right? I mean, we have a quarterly, want to really understand exactly, though we do an ongoing check-in, ongoing tracking of what we have done last quarter, we also do a quarterly retrospective. The retros, what is expected? Are we, generally, do we roll over to the next quarter? Or there are a lot of things which would have postponed during the quarter. And what is the ideal way of actually talking about in a retrospective meeting?
So retrospectives are interesting. I like to separate out the retrospective from the OKR setting session for the next quarter. And I like to do the retrospective before I do the setting session, or at least sort of at the same time so that it can feed into it, right? And what you're doing with the retrospective is you're looking back at the quarter. The quarter is not necessarily finished. The retrospective is not about scoring your OKRs. That's a separate process. The retrospective is about how did the OKRs that we had help us this quarter? What do we want to change about our OKR process? Which OKRs were well written and helpful for us? Which ones helped us make decisions? Which ones helped us align? Where were the gaps? Where were we misaligned? Where was it unclear? Where did we feel like we had too vague objectives that didn't really clarify things, and we had people going off in different directions because the objective wasn't clear and specific enough? Where did it constrain us unnecessarily? Like, where was there something where we thought, that's really annoying because that's what we should be doing, but the OKR doesn't help us? Which objectives did we change halfway through the quarter? All that sort of stuff. And this is where you're discussing, did we have too many OKRs? Did we have too many key results? Did we have not enough? Are we missing something really important? All of those kinds of things. And it's really a session to improve the process. And in that sense, it's not about delivering results. This is one meeting that's not really about delivering results. It's about improving the mechanism that you use to deliver results. What you're looking at is how do we deliver results given OKRs and how are we working with OKRs? How did that cost to deliver results? But you're not trying to deliver the results. You're trying to improve that method and that communication. And so the things you might be looking at here is who's using them, how often did they come up in meetings, did they get discussed, was it painful, did it help, did they help us make decisions, and all that kind of thing. Your outcome for this is usually increased insight into how better to set OKRs, and some decisions about how to use them differently. Like, okay, in that case, we should probably have, instead of 6, let's make an extra effort to have 3 or 4, 3 or fewer, right? Or whatever we want to do. Turns out that 1 was not enough. We really need an extra one about our people, about it. Okay, let's feed that information into our next OKR setting session to make sure we set OKRs in a good way. This particular one had a number in there, but it was all about traffic on their website. And actually, it turns out that the only way we can influence that we know about is by marketing, or try to drive our marketing spend. And that's not what we wanted to do. So when we want to do this, we need to do something different to saying just increase our traffic on our website, right? We're learning that kind of thing. What kinds of things should we be doing? And that then helps to improve that muscle. Because what I find is that every single company sets OKRs to start off with, and they put a lot of effort in, and then they get a headache because it's hard. And then they execute well for the quarter, and it's kind of okay. There's some gaps and some problems that come up. And then the second quarter, if they do a retrospective, that's when they can actually make sure that their second quarter starts to work really well. And that's when you can start to see, okay, it's worth us trying to use OKRs in this product area, or in that area as well, or in this business function, in this division. We should start at there next. We can think about those next steps and the things to change. But it's not about what work we did or what's the outcome. You do that separately, because the OKR should be well written enough that you can assess the result really easily. So you're doing the retrospective to improve the process. You do a setting session, and then you do an all hands to say, well, what was the score? How do we score? What was the result of our OKRs, and what are our new OKRs? And the result of our previous OKRs should be relatively easy to find, because if you've written them well, the numbers are quite easy to find. The milestones are easily defined. There should be no debate about, did we implement best practices, right? That kind of thing.
Perfect. I've also seen, when you're talking about OKR retros, we have to, the objectives are the outcomes that we are trying to discuss in the meetings. There are 2 ways that you can define the goals, that objectives, that probably a roof shot or a moon shot goals that what we have said, where most of the time you expect in a roof shot to at least have a 90% or beyond that. So I think that those categorization of having roof shot and moon shot together while discussing in the retrospective meetings would be more helpful. So when you're talking about a roof shot goal, exactly, it's well planned, the resources are in place. So I know it is easy for us to evaluate those first, and obviously there is always a room for your moonshot goals to discuss and how to go ahead. That's how we have seen and we have practiced also during our coaching sessions. So it gives us an interesting combo of both the type of objectives.
I mean, this whole moonshot roof shot thing is a really interesting cultural thing as well, because in America, people are quite naturally optimistic and ambitious. It's part of the American culture, and Australian culture has that as well. British a little less so, European less so again. And so what I found is that in different companies and different organizations, and even this kind of thing varies between different kinds of teams in a company or different companies. It's a very cultural specific thing, not just national cultures. But it really does make a difference. And so in some companies, it's really, really hard, or some people, some individuals, some teams, some cultures find it really hard to set any kind of moonshot. It's got to be like a thing I'm 100% sure I can achieve, and otherwise I can't possibly commit to it. And part of my thinking about this is that you just have to adapt to the culture, and then it starts slowly changing it. So if you make someone like that really uncomfortable by saying you must have one moonshot, you just create resistance, and you're going to create failure, and you're going to create discontent and all that sort of stuff. And so it really is about deciding how best to work this in this organization, and how do I make changes in the direction that I want to make changes in, as opposed to how do I force people down a particular path.
Perfect. Rightly said. I mean, once people start writing their roof shot goals and try to achieve that, and that gives more confidence for them to actually start writing their ambitious goal as well. So
Yeah.
with that, I think it has been an awesome discussion, a lot of insights, and thank you very much for taking time and talking to us today. We are going
Thanks,
to
Ramya.
connect to you quite often. Our audiences might want to really know more about what you're practicing out there, and probably we can connect on a live session sooner also.
For sure, for sure. We're very happy. If people want to connect to me on LinkedIn, it's Richard Russell. You'll find me on LinkedIn if you have a hunt around for Richard Russell and OKRs. But of course, Ramya can also connect